I don't have the time to continue hearing you continuously blabbering nonsense. I'm telling you, you are done. You're completely done. You just don't know who you have." Jasper, whose nose had already begun bleeding, was continuously infuriated when he was punched by Jack. In the next moment, he began threatening once again. Bam! But even before he could complete what he was saying, another punch landed on his face. "I already told you that I don't have the time to continue listening to you who is continuously blabbering nonsense. So, why don't you give me my wife so that I can get out of here sooner?" Jack asked as he looked at Jasper, whose right eye had already become like that of a panda. "You will not be able to get out of here. I will make sure that you." Jasper didn't believe that he was actually put in such a situation. So, since he had already gotten used to lecturing others, he began lecturing Jack despite what he had told him. Bam! This time, his right eye was also beaten black. At the same time, Jack finally said, "It seems that you are still an idiot. I guess I will not continue speaking with an idiot. As long as you don't comply, I will just beat you up. You wait. You dare to call me an idiot? Bam! I mean what I say, you are going to get, bam. Do you know the consequences of, bam? I swear that you will not. Bam! We can talk it out like men, bam, can you just stop? Bam, please, stop it already, bam, I already said. Bam, forgive me. Bam, I repent, bam, I. Bam, I. Bam, 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 bam. Even after Jasper finally stopped speaking, Jack did not stop pounding him. But still, he ensured that his punches were not fatal enough to deal that much damage on Jasper. But even so, the pain that Jasper was currently undergoing was immense. He had already suffered a lot, tried several times resisting, but with one of his hands broken, and his left shoulder already punctured by the laser that he had tried using to attack Jack, he was completely defenseless. At the same time, he really felt like crying. He wondered what was the reason he had decided to actually get involved with Jack in a matter that did not concern him. Stop, bam. When Jasper suddenly realized that even after he has stopped talking, Jack was actually continuing to beat him up, he couldn't help anymore and decided to speak out. But the moment that he said something, he suddenly realized that the intensity of the punches, added with the strength behind it, had actually increased. So, he was forced to immediately shut up, but no matter how much he continued tolerating it, the punches that were coming towards him did not stop. At this moment, Jasper finally began regretting the fact that he had actually chased everyone present near this place. Previously, he had been afraid that these people would be able to hear the time that he will be dealing with Jack, and perhaps having a good time with Denali. But now, it turned out that he had already prepared himself a slaughterhouse. There was nobody who was going to save him, as Jack continued pummeling him. Master, I think that he is currently silent. It was only after about 20 minutes that finally, Denali could not hold it anymore, and spoke out. It was not that she was actually having pity for this guy. It was just that, they had spent here over 30 minutes, and they still did not know about the location of Seline. Additionally, they had actually beaten up the second in command of the whole organization. So, she was currently afraid that, perhaps they might actually decide to do something to Seline. After all, they were the ones that were currently holding the initiative. Huh? He is silent. I didn't even notice, Jack replied before landing a final blow on Jasper's already devastated face. Both Denali and Samantha didn't know what to say about Jack's character. But at least, they knew that in case he was angry, and this was a matter concerning Seline, then, the person who was involved in the matter was definitely bound to suffer. As for Jasper, he actually wanted to cry. You didn't notice? How shameless of you to say that you did not notice that I had stopped speaking, when whenever I spoke a word, you actually increased the strength of the punches. Had it not been for the fact that Jasper was currently afraid of speaking a single word, he would have already shouted at Jack. Jack finally took a step backward, and took out his handkerchief, before wiping away the blood stains that had already stuck onto his knuckles. Finally. I was actually tired of listening to the nonsense that this guy was saying. Perhaps is there any one of you that actually understood what he was saying? I didn't even pay attention to what he was saying, Jack questioned as he looked at Denali and Samantha. But Denali and Samantha felt their bodies shuddering instinctively. At the same time, they were actually happy that they were not Jack's enemies. I think that he said that he was actually willing to repent for the sins that he had committed. Denali replied. Since she obviously did not like Jasper, there was no way that she was going to say anything positive about him. The reason that she said these words was simply because she knew that Jasper cared about his reputation the most. And she was sure that if others heard about this, they were going to actually laugh at Jasper, secretly of course. But nonetheless, this was something that Jasper was not going to agree to. After all, he had been living the life of an arrogant person, never giving in to anyone, not even the organization's leader. Oh, is that so? Since you are willing to repent your sins, I can at least forgive you for a while. So, why don't you get to your feet and tell me where you're keeping my wife? Jack asked with narrowed eyes as he looked at Jasper on the ground. When Jasper felt Jack's gaze on him, he was so frightened as he thought that Jack was actually going to beat him up. And for that reason, he did not respond, even though Jack was actually waiting for his response. What is up with this guy? Have I beaten him until he became mute? Jack asked in confusion. Denali on the other hand could only shake her head helplessly. In the end, she replied, this guy is actually afraid that in case he says anything, you are going to beat him up. After all, you told him to keep quiet previously. Oh, that's it? Okay then. Listen here young man, if you don't answer the questions that I am asking correctly, I'm going to beat you up again, Jack said as he looked at Jasper. While Jasper begrudgingly nodded his head hurriedly, both Samantha and Denali were helpless. After all, Jasper was actually older than Jack, but he was actually calling him a young man. It was as if Jack was referring to himself as an experienced old man. Now, start answering. Where did you keep my wife, and what is the reason behind you coming after her? No, instead, it should be like this. Why did you actually want me here? Jack asked. Jasper wanted to reply, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not even speak. After all, the punches that had landed on him had not only broken his lips, making them to swell, but even some of his teeth had been broken as well. Jasper had even bit on his own tongue, all of this ensuring that he was not actually capable of speaking easily. In the end, after several futile attempts, he could only look at Jack helplessly. You don't want to speak? Okay. I'm going to beat you up again. Jack simply shrugged his shoulders when he realized that Jasper was not replying. It was not that his IQ had actually dropped. It was simply because he didn't like Jasper, and this was actually part of the punishment that he had decided that Jasper was supposed to receive for kidnapping Seline. Jasper's eyes widened in horror, as he began waving his hand that had not been broken, while producing strange voices, trying to prevent Jack from beating him again. What is it? Do you have anything to say? If you don't, just allow me to beat the words into your head, Jack said once again. Jasper tried to speak once again, but no matter how hard he tried, he actually could not. In the end, he pointed towards his mouth and attempted showing signs that he could not speak, all of which were ignored by Jack. In the end, Jasper hurriedly struggled back to his feet, and stumbled towards one of the shelves that was present inside the room. There, he took out a pen and a piece of paper. He came towards the table before beginning to use his uninjured hand to write, but since he was continuously trembling and was having several wounds on his body, he was not able to write easily. In the end, a set of clumsy words appeared on the piece of paper. The handwriting was actually worse than that of a 1-year-old child who had just begun schooling. The words read, "I have placed her in a place that only I can enter. Additionally, I have not done anything to her, she is completely safe." Previously, when he was making this plan, Jasper had actually decided that he did not want to get deep into the bad books of Jack. For that reason, he had instructed the group of people that took away Seline not to harm a single hair on her. And when they brought her here, even though he was impressed by her beauty, he was still able to know that he was not supposed to do anything to her. Otherwise, there was going to be trouble. But still, he had been trying to think of a way of using Seline to trade with Jack, so that he could allow Denali to come back to the organization. But in the end, he was actually beaten up. Since Jasper had decided to cooperate, Jack did not want to continue wasting time here. After all, he did not know about Seline's current situation. For that reason, he wasn't willing to let her stay wherever it was that Jasper thought that it was safe for her. Hurry up now. Lead the way. I don't want my wife to continue staying here any longer, Jack said nonchalantly. But still, there was coldness in his eyes, as he had not yet forgiven the organization for kidnapping Seline. Jasper nodded his head, and in the next moment, he led the group towards the exit of the room. After that, they headed towards an underground basement. As Jasper staggered forward, he suddenly realized that the atmosphere wasn't good at all. In the next moment, his suspicions came true. How good of you. You actually decided to place my wife inside an underground basement, preventing her from getting the sun. Don't you know that you are denying her vitamin D? Jack asked. His voice was casual, But Jasper knew that Jack was not impressed. But still, he still suppressed himself from saying anything, as it would only cause him pain due to the wounds that he had suffered. Jack did not expect Jasper to reply either. When they entered the underground basement, Jack finally realized that although it was a basement, it was actually quite luxurious. Walking along the long corridor, the group finally arrived in front of a door. Using his hand, Jasper took out a key and struggled to unlock the door. When the door was opened, Jack took a step inside. There, he saw that Seline was actually seated on a bed, staring at the wall blankly. Even when the door opened, she did not look towards them. This made him furrow his brows. He did not know the reason as to why Seline was behaving in such a way, but he was of course displeased. Ignoring Jasper, he took a step forward and entered the room. Denali and Samantha both kept an eye on Jasper, ensuring that he did not play any trick on them. "Hey sweetheart, are you okay? I'm here to take you home," Jack said the moment that he arrived next to Seline. It was only when she heard his voice that she finally looked at him. Her eyes widened in surprise, before finally letting out a relieved smile. She immediately got to her feet and jumped into Jack's embrace. Jack simply caressed her hair as he waited for her to calm down. "Are you okay?" Jack asked once again after about 2 minutes. Seline, who had just calmed down, finally nodded her head. She replied, "Other than missing the sun and so on, I'm okay." "That's good," Jack replied, before sitting onto the bed with her. At the same time, he asked, "Are you injured anywhere? Or do you have any problem?" Even as he asked, he took out the body-strengthening solution and handed it over to her. When Seline saw the bottle that contained the body-strengthening solution, she smiled sweetly. After all, this was just a reminder of how much Jack cared about her. Even though it was true that she did not have any injuries on her, she still went ahead and took the body-strengthening solution, just to ensure that Jack was not worried about her. "You know, Jack, the situation today actually reminds me of the time that we met again after a long period of separation," Seline said after a moment of silence. "Is that so?" Jack asked, as he held Seline in his hands. "MMMH. You remember that time when the Dante family had actually organized for me to be kidnapped? At that time, you had also realized it, but you still let them kidnap the two of us. After that, you actually beat up the people that had kidnapped us, before looking for their boss." Seline nodded her head before replying. Jack was also reminded of the time that Seline was talking about. At that time, the two of them had just recently met, and they did not possess the memory about each other. At that time, although they felt familiar with each other, they were like two strangers who had just begun getting along. But still, subconsciously, they were always open with each other. During that time, when they met again, both of their hearts had been frozen. Celine's heart had been frozen since she didn't even know what she had lost, and she had been so engaged in the family business that her mother wanted her to take care of in the future. As for Jack, the life that he was experiencing in the Alfonso family was just tormenting, and other than that, he had even lost his mother, ensuring that the ice in his heart condensed further. But after the two of them met, the ice in their hearts began melting slowly, and even before they knew it, they had already regained their memories, they had even gotten engaged. The two of them remained silent, as they continued to reminisce about the past. They were not in a hurry, especially for Jack, since he had already gotten Seline. Both Samantha and Denali were relieved when they saw that Seline was actually okay. At the same time, they made sure to keep an eye on Jasper, to ensure that he did not do anything funny. As for the couple, the two of them decided to ignore them, to ensure that the two of them had freedom to talk to each other. After all, Seline had been kidnapped for 3 days now. As for Jasper, he really wanted to cry. After all, looking at the relationship that Jack shared with Seline, it was obvious that it was deep. Additionally, previously, Jack had been calling Seline wife from time to time. That implied that, even if they were not married now, he was planning to marry her. But why was it that Denali was actually by his side? Since the man was already having a person that he was intending to marry, then why was it that Denali actually didn't want to consider him? He really loved her, and he had been doing that for several years now. During these years, he had already abandoned everything that he was doing previously, added to the times that he was going to look for ladies to entertain himself, just for her. But no matter how hard he tried, he didn't get a chance. But on the other hand, Jack didn't seem to take Denali in that way, and even had a deep relationship with another girl. But still, Denali seemed loyal to him. Jasper began thinking about what Jack might have done to make Althea, a beauty who was known to have a cold and arrogant personality, to agree to call him master. Could it be that she was forced? But, considering the way that she was behaving, it was obvious that she was actually doing this on her own accord. So, what could be the secret? At that moment, other than the fact that Jasper had planned that he had to make sure that Jack paid for all the pain that he had made him suffer, he wanted to also know the secret that Jack had utilized to subdue Denali. "Tell me, did that idiot do anything that you don't like?" Jack asked Seline. Seline finally came out of our thoughts, and looked towards the entrance of the room. There, she saw the man that had brought her here. At that time, she had tried resisting, but she found out that she was not his match. The guy brought her here, and locked her up. After that, he had said that she had to stay here and wait until Jack came over. Only then would she be released, as long as Jack agreed to what they had to ask of him. During the first day, Seline had stayed inside the house, and food was provided for her, but still, she didn't like being alone inside a room, and she didn't even see the light of the day. Although she was expecting that Jack was going to come, she was also anxious, as she did not know for what reason these people wanted Jack. This incident also reminded her of the situation where Samantha had actually tried kidnapping her. At that time, Samantha had been beaten up by Jack. As for now, they were actually facing a whole organization, so she wasn't sure if Jack was going to be capable of dealing with the entire organization, despite knowing that he was actually very strong. During the third day, of which was today, she had thought that they had perhaps done something to Jack. And that was the reason why she was feeling regretful, that she was actually causing Jack a lot of trouble. But when she suddenly saw that Jack was here, and the person who had locked her up was actually beaten until he was unrecognizable, she was finally relieved. "Actually, he did not do much to me. Instead, the thing that I don't really like is the fact that he locked me up. And he was looking at me lecherously, and I was afraid that he was going to do something to me. After all, I'm not as strong as him," Seline replied. To say the truth, she really hated Jasper. After all, he was the reason as to why both Samantha and Denali had been injured. The three of them had been running around for 2 days, just because they were being chased. And now, seeing that he had also taken a beating, the hatred in her heart had also decreased a little. But still, she was not satisfied with that. "So, what kind of punishment do you think he deserves?" Jack asked once again. "So, what kind of punishment do you think he deserves?" Jack asked once again. "Where are you, Jasper?" Just before Seline could reply, there was a loud shout that reached their ears. And before the group could even reply, they heard the sound of footsteps heading their way. And not long after, a man wearing a blue mask on his face walked in. The moment that Jasper saw him, his heart began beating with excitement. After all, he had not expected that there was actually a person that was going to come over. He had been enduring the suffering that he was undergoing all this while simply because he was afraid that Jack was going to beat him up again. But now, things were completely different. He looked towards the man with the blue mask and shouted. But it was only after he had futilely attempted several times that he realized that he could actually not speak. When he realized that, his eyes widened, and in the next moment, he began frantically waving towards the man, trying to signal him that he was in trouble. "Who the FCK brought here a prisoner, and actually let him free?" The man who had just entered saw that Jasper was waving towards him. Still, since Jasper's face was currently completely different and it was battered, the man did not recognize him. When Jasper heard his words, his eyes widened in disbelief. At the same time, he began lamenting in his heart. "What the heck? You actually cannot even recognize your own brother even if his face had been destroyed." But no matter how hard he thought about it, there was no way that he was going to say the words. The man completely ignored Jasper and focused on looking at the surroundings. Then, he shouted once again, "Jasper! Where the heck are you? Do you think that I have the whole day to wait for you here? You are currently needed by father?" It was also during this moment that the man also realized that other than the idiot that was still waving towards him, there was actually another group of people here. At first, since he noticed that they were ladies, he didn't care as he had already gotten used to Jasper's behavior of coming with several women in his residence. But it was only for a moment. At that time, he suddenly realized that there was actually one of the ladies that he recognized. "Althea?" the man asked in both surprise and disbelief. At the same time, he couldn't help but wonder if his brother had actually succeeded in subduing Denali. Denali's expression shifted when she heard the man's voice. She of course recognized him. After all, she had spent many years in this place, and she had already come to know all the people that were in the top echelons, apart from those that had stayed hidden. At the same time, she felt irritated considering that everybody that she met was actually calling her Althea. It was not that she was the one who had decided on the name. Even she herself did not know where the name came from, but it had suddenly become her name, as everyone in the organization was actually referring to her like that. She didn't really like the name considering that it was actually throwing away her identity. She really wanted to maintain her identity as Denali, especially after she met with Jack, and began working for him. Althea. That was the name that reminded her all the time that she was in the organization, doing as the organization wanted her to do. Those were the memories that she really didn't want to remember. Have you seen my brother? Just as Denali was lost in her thoughts, the man with a blue mask on arrived in front of her before questioning. To him it didn't matter what Denali was actually trying to do here. As long as she was not the enemy of the organization, he didn't care. Denali on the other hand had a strange expression on her face, as she pointed towards Jasper, who had already been pushed onto the ground by the man in a blue mask. Him? Does he actually know where my brother is? The man asked in a confused tone. That is actually your brother, Denali replied indifferently. The man blinked his eyes several times, and even looked at Denali incredulously, expecting that she was going to change her statement. But no matter how hard he stared at her, she did not say anything else. Are you for real? The man asked once again. Denali shrugged her shoulders, clearly not caring whether the man believed her or not. After all, she was not here because she was in good terms with the organization, but because she was currently in bad terms with them. The man wearing the blue mask looked at Jasper, who was on the ground, and was surprised to find that he had actually written on a piece of paper some words. Despite the handwriting being clumsy, the man was still able to read the words. Richard, I am Jasper. Take care of that group of people as soon as possible, otherwise, they are going to get out of here scot-free after beating me up. Richard's eyes widened as he could not actually believe that the person who had been beaten into a pulp was actually his brother. From his memories, he had never seen his brother getting beaten up, as he was actually doted on by their father. But now, Jasper had actually been beaten up until Richard, his own elder brother, could not actually recognize him. But in the next moment, his eyes turned cold as he looked at Denali and Samantha. Thereafter, he said, I don't care about the reason as to why you attacked my brother. But, you have to know that my brother is the second in command of the whole organization. For that reason, you will have to accept the punishment for attacking your superior. Immediately after he finished his words, Richard deftly attacked. Even though he was angry, he did not attack with the intent to kill. Instead, he was attacking with the intent to injure her. Looking at the fist that was coming towards her, Denali did not panic. Instead, with her eyes narrowed, she also launched her punch forward. Boom! The moment that the two fists collided, there was a small shockwave that was produced. In the end, both the two sides retreated a few steps backwards. It was obvious that from the first clash, the both of them were actually evenly matched. Richard's eyes narrowed as he looked at Denali with surprise in his eyes. After all, it was not long ago that he had actually come into contact with Denali. But now, he was surprised that Denali was actually able to push him back. But still, he did not take it to heart. Instead, he attacked once again. But no matter how much he attacked, he was not able to land any attack on her, and neither was Denali. As the fight commenced, the sound of fists connecting with flesh reverberated through the air. Denali's powerful blows were met with Richard's expertly timed blocks and evasive maneuvers. The clash of their bodies echoed, filling the space with an exhilarating mix of grunts and quick breaths. Denali's strength and explosiveness were matched by Richard's agility and unyielding defense. Each strike, each countermove, displayed a perfect blend of strategy and execution. Jasper had been watching from the side all this while, and he was actually surprised by Denali's prowess. After all, he knew his brother's abilities all too well. But now, he was actually not capable of defeating Denali. Denali's thunderous punches tested Richard's resilience and reflexes, but Richard held firm, deftly dodging and parrying with expert precision. Richard, in turn, launched a series of lightning-fast kicks and elusive footwork that kept Denali on constant guard. Every blow landed and every defense was met with an equally impressive counter, pushing the fight to its limits. As the fight progressed, the intensity only grew. Sweat glistened on their brows, their muscles twitching with exhaustion, but neither Denali nor Richard showed any signs of backing down. Richard was not willing to give up considering that Denali was actually involved with the injuring of his brother. Other than that, he had to preserve his image as the elder brother, by ensuring that he actually dealt with a person who was of a lower status. As for Denali, she was not willing to give up. Instead, she continuously attacked, blocking, and parrying the attacks that were aimed towards her. She was not willing to show any weakness in front of Jack. The longer Richard fought with Denali, the tighter his brows furrowed. Even though he had been expecting that Denali was a prodigy, he had never expected that the rate of improvement was this astonishing. He began wondering about what she would have been doing during the previous months that she had disappeared. Could it be that she had found another organization that was able to grant her with different serums that increased her abilities? Richard thought to himself as he continued fighting. As two attacks connected, the two sides both retreated, and looked at each other cautiously. "Have you betrayed the organization?" Richard asked coldly. "I don't belong to the organization anymore, and you will have to know that I am no longer your subordinate. So, I don't have to follow any orders that you give," Denali replied. Richard was confused when he heard her words. If it was true that she was no longer a member of the Shadow Organization, then how did she get here, or why was she here? Richard was actually a person who had been keeping a low profile. Although he could have actually taken the position of the organization leader, he didn't care about it. As for the time that his younger brother was looking for a chance to become the second in command of the organization, he obviously supported him. Just as Richard was about to inquire about what Denali was actually doing here, Jack and Seline walked out of the room. Both Jack and Seline had also heard the commotion that was happening outside, and for that reason, they had been attracted after they realized that the fight was going on for a period now. The moment that the two of them stepped out, Richard squinted his eyes as he looked at Jack. In the next moment, he asked in surprise, "Why do you look alike? Are you related?" Jack's eyes narrowed once again. Previously, Eric had said the very same thing as Richard was saying. But, at that time, no matter how much he attempted to question Eric about it, Eric always replied that in case he said anything about it, he was going to die. Since Jack had already seen as one of the people from the Panthers organization dying from poisoning, he did not want to risk Eric dying so early before he could torture him. But now, this was the second time that he met another person that they were meeting for the first time, was actually saying that he looked like someone else. "I look like who?" Jack asked as he took a step forward and approached Richard. Richard on the other hand realized that he had said something that he did not want to dwell on. For that reason, he simply questioned, "Who are you?" "I asked a question. So, why don't you tell me whom it was that you were saying that I looked like?" Jack asked, this time with a cold tone. Richard suddenly felt a shiver running down his spine as he felt Jack's intense gaze on him. But still, he was able to maintain his composure and said, "You have to know that this is the Shadow Organization, and you don't have any authority here. So, stay at the side and let me deal with the matter that I was dealing with first." Richard was about to return his focus to Denali when suddenly, Jack grasped his shoulder. "I asked a damn question, and you better answer before things get worse." Jasper on the other hand, who had already been getting anxious the moment that he realized that his brother could not actually deal with Denali, was surprised when he noticed that Jack was actually out of the room. Since he already knew that Jack was actually way stronger than Denali, and due to the fact that Denali was able to match Richard, that implied that Richard was going to have a difficult time when it came to dealing with Jack. For that reason, he immediately took out an emergency communication device that he had been hiding, and immediately contacted his father to come over. He did not say anything, rather, he sent a distress signal. Richard's gaze turned cold the moment that he realized that Jack was preventing him from moving. Even though it was true that he was not currently capable of dealing with Denali, that did not mean that there was just anybody that was going to be able to deal with him. "I already said that you should let me go," Richard said in an angry tone. And in the next moment, he clenched his fist and attacked Jack. Thump! Jack's reaction was fast, and before the fist could connect with his chest, he was able to grasp it with his left hand. Richard was surprised by Jack's reaction speed. At the same time, he had never expected that Jack was going to be capable of easily stopping his attack. But before he could even react, Jack's grasp suddenly tightened on the fist that he was holding. At that moment, Richard felt like the hand was going to be broken. The bones in that hand had already began creaking, showing signs that, in case the pressure was increased, even by just a little bit, it was going to be shattered. As the pain rushed into his mind through the nervous system, Richard reacted deftly. Using his knee, he attacked Jack, aiming to make sure that he released his hand. Bam! The attack connected, but instead of hitting Jack on the stomach, the attack actually connected with Jack's raised left leg. Crack! You better stop trying to attack futilely. Start answering the questions because I don't have the whole day. Jack intensified the strength that he was using to hold Richard's hand, and it began cracking. Richard hissed in pain, as he felt that the bones in his hand had already begun fracturing. Had it not been for the fact that Jack was restraining himself, the hand would have already been broken. The reason as to why Jack was not being excessive to Richard as he was to Jasper was simply because, until now, Richard had not done something that crossed his limits. But still, he would not hesitate in case Richard did not respond. This was the first time that Richard had actually been placed in such a position. Additionally, the person that was actually putting him in such a tight spot was actually a person of a younger generation. Even though it was true that Denali was also younger than him, at least, he knew that she was a prodigy when it came to fighting. But right now, there was actually another young man who was even younger than Denali, who was actually showing that he was stronger than him. He had already begun sweating due to the pain that he was experiencing. But at the same time, he wasn't willing to reveal the information, as it was considered confidential to the organization. Even Jasper came to know of the information simply because he was part of the family, and not due to the fact that he was actually the second in command of the organization. Crack. When Jack realized that Richard actually had no intention of replying, he increased the strength in his hand. And in the next moment, Richard's hand actually broke. Even though he was currently undergoing a lot of pain, Richard still did not utter a sound. At this moment, he was actually struggling, trying to ensure that he did not say anything. He was sure that as long as he continued staying here for a long time, perhaps his father or grandfather might come over to check out the situation. Initially, I did not have the intention of dealing with anyone that was not related with the kidnapping of my wife. But it seems that I will have to deal with you as well because you possess important information about me, Jack said as he looked at Richard, who was already sweating. Although it might be true that you possess the information because you are told, I don't think I can allow someone who possesses information about me to go free easily. You know, this is actually a risk that I'm not willing to take, Jack continued. It was true that perhaps the information that this person possessed was not important, but it was vital to him. After all, every now and again he was actually being said to look like someone, but they never completed who it was that he looked like. Jack was about to take another action to ensure that Richard said the information that he possessed, but he suddenly felt that there was actually a group of people that was approaching. Even though they were far, Jack could actually detect them coming over. This was a surprise to him, but he still reacted. Bring that idiot along, Jack instructed Denali and Samantha, before beginning to drag Richard out of the basement. No matter how hard Richard attempted to struggle and get out of Jack's grasp, there was no change at all. He even attempted attacking Jack, but just like before, all his attacks ended up futile. And each moment that his attack failed, Jack also retaliated by making sure that Richard experienced pain. At this moment, he was trying to torture information out of Richard. The moment that they got out of the building that Jasper possessed, they certainly realized that there was actually a large group of people that was coming their way. And each and every one of them was actually fully armed, ready for war. In front of them was an old man. Well, although he was an old man, other than the hair that was currently a mixture of gray and white, his face was actually quite young. Beside him stood a man who was currently wearing a purple mask. From behind the mask, Jack could see that there was anger in his eyes. Behind the two men, there was a group of 4 men that both had blue masks on their faces, and behind these 4 people, there was a group of about 30 people that each wore a bronze mask. When the group suddenly saw the way that Richard was being handled, and added to another person who was completely battered, they were surprised. The man who was currently wearing a purple mask felt his heart boiling with anger. At the same time, he realized that if the person with the blue mask was Richard, then the other one who was completely battered was actually the son that he really doted on. What is the meaning of this, Jack? Weren't we supposed to be discussing something, rather than engaging in a fight like this? The man with a purple mask on his face asked coldly. Jack was surprised the moment that he realized that the other party actually knew his name. He looked at him with narrowed eyes and asked, "You know me?" "I definitely know you well, and to say the truth, I had been expecting you to come over," the man replied calmly. "Oh, since that is the case, I perhaps believe that you might actually possess information that is more detailed than this idiot's," Jack said as he pointed towards Richard, who was currently on the ground. "Oh, since that is the case, I perhaps believe that you might actually possess information that is more detailed than this idiot's," Jack said as he pointed towards Richard, who was currently on the ground. "What information are you talking about?" the man wearing a purple mask on his face asked in a confused tone. It was obvious that he did not understand what Jack was actually talking about. "This guy just said that I look like someone. And this is not the first time that I have come to hear this. So I was expecting that he was going to give me information about this person that I look like. Jack replied nonchalantly. The man looked at Richard on the ground, before shifting his gaze towards Jasper, who was currently being held by Denali. His eyes shone with surprise the moment that he realized that she was actually able to subdue Jasper. But still, the coldness around him increased the moment that he focused on Jasper's battered face. After all, that implied that the pain that Jasper had undergone to be in such a condition was not small. "Do you believe that I will give you the information that you want despite what you have done?" the man with a purple mask on his face asked. "What have I done? I have simply retaliated. If you are talking about that idiot with unrecognizable ugly face, the only reason as to why he is the way that he is currently is due to the fact that he dared to kidnap my wife," Jack began replying calmly. "As for this one on the ground, he attempted attacking Denali, who is currently in my subordinate. So, I don't think that I did anything wrong. And in fact, I have been very lenient for not killing that idiot that dared to kidnap my wife," Jack continued. The eyes that were exposed on the man's face that was covered with a mask narrowed, and at the same time, the anger that was blazing within them increased as well. The man was just preventing himself from acting on impulse and attacking Jack at this moment. After all, Jack was talking about beating his 2 sons as if it was nothing. "Now, are you going to give me the information that I want or not? I have already gotten impatient, and I still have a lot of things to do. So, better hurry up and give me what I want so that I can get out of here," Jack said as he looked at the man with a purple mask on his face. All this while, even though Jack was actually talking to the person with the purple mask on his face, his attention had actually been fixed on the person without a mask. At this moment, he could detect that this person was actually strong. Even though he himself was currently at level 10, he could tell that this person was perhaps at a level that was beyond level 10. And this guy was actually scrutinizing him. "I say, what nonsense are you guys talking about? Just go ahead and take care of them. After that, we can talk after we have already laid out the punishment for the mistakes that they had committed." At this moment, the old man spoke indifferently. The moment that he said that, the man with a purple mask on his face nodded his head. And in the next moment, he instructed the group behind him. "All of you, take all of them down. But you have to ensure that you don't kill them. Just beat them up to the same state as my son is currently in." "Yes." The group behind him replied at the same time in a loud voice, as if they were soldiers. And then the next moment, they all focused their gazes on Jack's group. Jack narrowed his eyes and he was just about to take action when suddenly, he noticed that the man with the purple mask was actually walking towards him. "Since you are actually capable of dealing with my son, that implies that you might be capable of dealing with the other 4 as well. We don't have to take the risks, so I will take care of you by myself," the man said coldly. As he continued to approach Jack, the muscles of his body began tensing, and as he moved closer to Jack, the speed at which he was moving began increasing. Jack on the other hand was not worried about the man in front of him, but instead, he was worried about the group that was supposed to attack Denali and Seline. Previously, he had already beaten Jasper to the state that he was currently in simply because he had kidnapped Seline. And had it not been for the fact that he had not dealt any damage to Seline, then Jack would have killed him. "Since this is the way that you want to play the game, then I will play with you," Jack said. And in the next moment, one by one, several figures began appearing behind him and the group. Each one of them was a lady and was wearing an armor. The moment that they appeared, Samantha, Denali, and Seline were surprised. After all, each and every one of them had actually seen a lady that was dressed this way. Initially, Samantha had even guessed that this group was actually from the stronghold that Jack was from. And now, she was beginning to wonder what kind of stronghold would actually be capable of possessing such a large number of powerhouses. One by one, all the 100 puppets that had been given to Jack after Samantha had signed the contract appeared. And the moment that they did so, they all focused on the group that was marching forward. At this moment, it was not just the man who was wearing a purple mask on his face, but even the old man was stunned. At the same time, they couldn't help but wonder how loose their security had been. After all, how could they not notice over 100 people coming to the organization? These people actually forgot the fact that even they themselves had not realized that these people were present. Of course, to them, there was no way that Jack was capable of simply summoning all these people from different parts of the country to come here at the same time. After all, to them, that was an impossibility. While the group was still stunned, Jack took a deep breath and engaged with the system. "System, I would like to utilize the 2 chances to improve my level. Host, please confirm that you would like to claim 2 levels of increase in strength. At this moment, Jack had finally decided that he was not going to spare this organization. After all, he had initially planned that he was going to utilize these 2 chances to increase his level in the future. But now, he had no choice but to use the chances only after a month. I confirm that, Jack stated in his mind. Reward claimed. Due to the fact that the chances have been staying idle for 1 month, the improvement this time will be more than just the improvement in the physical abilities. The moment that the system prompt appeared in front of him, Jack suddenly felt that there was a warm current that was washing through his body. And in that exact moment, he felt that all of his muscles were getting strengthened. And it was not just a matter of the improvement on his physical abilities, but even the cellular abilities had been improved. Even though it was not by a huge extent, Jack felt that this time, his body had actually changed. It was not just the improvement of the strength that he had improved by improving by 2 levels, but due to the fact that he felt that the structure of his body had changed. Congratulations, host. You have taken the first step towards greatness. Your genes have been modified, improving them to a level that is beyond that of a normal human being. Currently, the host can be considered as a superhuman. Host, please don't confuse the word superhuman. Even though it is true that humans always referred to those that possess incredible strength or other incredible abilities as superhumans, but this is a term that is only supposed to apply on those that have better genes than the others. And currently, although it is true that the host is currently a superhuman, but just like the previous rankings, the host is currently at the 2nd level out of 10 levels of the superhuman ranking. Jack took a deep breath after reading the information that had been presented in front of him. Finally, the system had revealed what was laying beyond level 10. A superhuman, huh? Now, I see, Jack thought to himself as he looked at the old man. Due to the fact that his genes had been modified, he realized that perhaps his life limit had been extended. Though he did not know by how many years his life had been extended. But still, he was finally able to realize the reason as to why the system had said that there would be different types of rewards that he would receive. Flashback *****. Ding. There's another reward, that is, monthly reward, semi-annual reward, yearly reward, decade reward, century reward, millennium reward, and so on. End *****. Looking at the old man who was currently possessing the face of a middle-aged man, it was obvious that his genes had also been modified. The genetic modification that old man has undergone is incomplete. For that reason, he cannot actually be considered a superhuman, and at the same time, he is way above level 10 of human power ranking. At this moment, another system prompt appeared in front of him. Jack was surprised, but at the same time, he felt relieved that he had actually undergone the genetic modification. Host, please note. The genetic modification that you have undergone was simply due to the fact that you have currently moved from level 10 of a normal human, to the 2nd level of a superhuman. The improvement that has been brought about due to the fact that the slots had been preserved for 1 month is the increase in combat capabilities. Even if the host currently faces 3 level 2 superhumans, he would be able to deal with them. And in the case where the host faces a level 3 superhuman, the host will be able to put up a good fight. And in the case where the host faces a level 3 superhuman, the host will be able to put up a good fight. The moment that the system prompts finally stopped, Jack fixed his attention to the man wearing a purple mask in front of him. How is it possible that you are capable of bringing in over 100 people without being detected? The man wearing a purple mask on his face asked as he looked at the group that was currently standing behind Jack. Even though it was true that he felt that the ladies behind Jack were not that strong, but, considering the number that they were having, he believed that if they attacked at the same time, even he himself would have a difficult time getting out unscathed. It was not that he had already known what current level the group of ladies possessed, but just the vibe that they were giving as they stared at them was enough to tell him that this group of ladies was not to be messed with. You wanted to play the game, then let's begin. After Jack said that, he looked at Samantha and Olivia, and nodded his head at them. The two of them did not need Jack to say anything. They immediately understood that he was implying that the two of them should protect Seline. At this moment, Denali had already been worried. After all, she knew that the person wearing a purple mask was not to be messed with. But still, she decided to trust Jack about this. But the only thing that was currently making her unsure of the situation was the fact that there was actually a person who was not wearing a mask. And this person was capable of commanding a person with the purple mask. That implied that this person had to have greater strength, because only those that were strong possessed greater authority in the shadow organization, other than Jasper. Okay then. Since you don't want to tell me how you managed to sneak in this group of whatever, I will just beat the information out of you. The man with the purple mask on his face wanted to continue saying something, but when he saw that Jack was actually approaching him, he simply decided not to say anything else and instead, use his fists to get Jack to tell him what he wanted. The moment that Jack arrived in front of the man with the purple mask, he attacked without hesitation. This time, he wasn't willing to waste any more time. Seline had been in this place for a very long time now, even though it was just 3 days, and he needed to get her back home. After all, she had been away from home for over a week now, and he was sure that her parents were getting worried about her. The man with the purple mask was actually preparing himself for an intense fight, but surprisingly, he didn't even have a chance to react before he was blown backwards by Jack's punch. Bam! As he landed heavily on the ground, blood began leaking from the corner of his mouth. At the same time, he felt that several bones in his body had already been broken. That can be considered the punishment for talking to me in such a manner. The only reason as to why I have not killed you is simply because I need the information from you, Jack said. At this moment, even the group that was wearing bronze masks had not actually tried attacking the people behind Denali, Samantha, and Seline. It was not just a matter of not knowing the strength of the other party, but also due to the fact that they had a numerical advantage. The moment that they realized that the person with a purple mask on his face had been beaten onto the ground with just a single punch, they were completely stunned. This person was actually considered an elder figure in the shadow organization. Even the leader of the organization had to obey whatever this man said. He was the previous leader of the organization, before he finally retreated, giving the younger generation a chance to continue leading the organization. But now, the person that they had thought to be strong, a person that they always looked up to, was actually defeated by a youth in a single blow. The old man was also surprised at the moment that he realized that Jack had actually dealt with the man with just a single blow. His eyes narrowed at this moment as he felt that Jack had suddenly changed. Previously, when he saw Jack, he had simply thought of him as a person that was just strong, but nothing much than that. In front of him, he believed that he could easily take care of Jack. But now that he was looking at him carefully again, he realized that the aura that Jack possessed suddenly changed. It had changed so drastically and that, currently, the old man suddenly felt that there was immense danger that was coming from Jack. Since you are the one who thinks that we are supposed to be beaten even though we are not in the wrong, then I will just have to teach you a lesson. At this moment, Jack looked at the old man and said, "Young man, don't act arrogant simply because you have taken care of my son. You have to know that beyond the hills, there are always mountains," the old man said as he immediately began releasing his aura. At this moment, everyone in the surroundings felt somehow suppressed. Even though it was just a little, they felt that they were actually inferior in front of this man. "I will educate you today, and show you that even if you are strong, you will have to know how to be humble," the old man said as he looked at Jack, who was calmly approaching him. At this moment, even though it was true that he felt that there was actually immense danger that was coming from Jack, he didn't want to take the situation that much seriously. Additionally, he had a face to preserve. There was no way that he was going to admit defeat in front of his son, and more so, his grandsons. Since he had already offended Jack, then, there was no going back. Just looking at the condition that Jasper and his son were currently in, it was obvious that Jack was not a person that would let go those that had offended him easily. Not long ago, he had given a command for them to be beaten up. For that reason, it was obvious that Jack had already developed a grudge against him. As for the shadow organization, he knew that it was already in trouble. After all, he had not expected that Jasper was going to actually kidnap Jack's fiancée, just to bring him over. "You know, old man, you are actually not even qualified to face me. After all, you are just a half-baked product." The moment that Jack said that, he made a move. The aura that was already beginning to suppress the people in the surrounding area suddenly disappeared as an even more powerful aura took over. And of course, this aura only suppressed those that were not on Jack's side. At this moment, everyone began trembling as they looked at Jack in fear. They suddenly felt that Jack was an existence that they could not reach. Even the old man felt the same feeling, even though it was true that he was currently in the process of genetic modification. How's this possible? This is something that is only supposed to happen in case someone gets resources from the strongholds," the old man exclaimed as he looked at Jack in fear. At this moment, he had completely forgotten about keeping his reputation anymore. After all, He knew that even if he fought using all his strength, there was no way that he was going to win. Since he had already gotten to the level that he was currently in, he of course knew about what he was supposed to do to get to the next level. But still, there was just a single problem. That was the fact that the resources that were required for someone to be capable of breaking the genetic lock were quite expensive. That was something that the Shadow Organization could not afford, and currently, even though it was true that he was only halfway through, the number of resources that he required to be able to completely break the genetic lock was actually as twice as the one that he required to be able to reach the level that he was in. But now, in front of him, Jack was actually at that level. He had already broken through the genetic lock, and he had gotten to the level of a superhuman. He himself had already encountered a person that had already broken the genetic lock. But, the aura of that person was not the same as the one that Jack possessed. Jack's aura was way thicker. It was also true that the Shadow Organization currently possessed a lot of wealth. But, the resources that were required for the genetic lock to be broken were always rare, and could not be simply purchased because someone possessed money. And to purchase those resources, the money that was used by the normal community was actually completely useless. To purchase those resources, one had to exchange them for something that was of the same value. Strongholds. It seems that you also know about the strongholds. I guess that perhaps you might actually possess even more information about what I want, Jack said with narrowed eyes as he looked at the old man. Strongholds. It seems that you also know about the strongholds. I guess that perhaps you might actually possess even more information about what I want, Jack said with narrowed eyes as he looked at the old man. In the end, the old man could only resign to the defeat. After all, it was true that the Shadow Organization possessed great strength, but in front of someone who had already broken the genetic lock, they were completely useless. And other than the fact that Jack had actually broken the genetic lock, there was also a fact that he currently possessed a group of 100 strong people. Just looking at the armors that they were putting on, the old man could already tell that even if he decided to bring in those that were always putting on black masks, they would be completely useless. He had already determined that the level of equipment that these people were putting on was of the same level as the guardians of several organizations in the strongholds possessed. And if that was the case, it was obvious that their strength was also supposed to be of the same level. And since that was the case, even though they might be a single or two levels behind those with the purple mask and the blue masks, the numerical advantage was enough for them to defeat them. Let's get somewhere to talk, the old man said. The moment that he said these words, everyone was surprised. They looked at him, wondering where the arrogant old man had gone to. After all, it was not long ago that he was just talking about teaching Jack a lesson. But now, he had already given in even though Jack had not even taken action yet. At the same time, they couldn't help but wonder just how strong Jack was. After all, the surprise and the fear in the old man's eyes could not be hidden from them. Currently, the thing that Jack really wanted was the information. Even though it was true that Samantha was currently working for him, she did not actually give him much information about the stronghold, as she was completely prohibited from doing that, or otherwise she would just end up dead. But now, looking at this old man, Jack was not afraid of forcing him to give him the information. After all, Samantha was currently considered useful to him. But this old man, it was completely different. So, Jack looked towards Denali and the others, and instructed them to come over. As for the 100 puppets that he had brought in, using the telepathic connection that they shared, he instructed them that they had to make sure that the Shadow Organization didn't play any dirty tricks on him. The old man led the way back into Jasper's residence. There, they went into a secluded room that was also in the underground basement. Can we talk alone? The old man asked as he looked at Seline, Denali, and Samantha who had also come into the room. She is my wife, she's my subordinate, and she's also my subordinate. They are all trustworthy, and I don't think that there's anything that needs to be hidden from them, Jack said as he pointed towards Seline, Denali and Samantha. Looking at Jack's resolute expression, the old man knew that there was no way that he was going to convince Jack otherwise. So, rather than wasting his time, he decided to go ahead and inform Jack of all that he could. Ahem. Actually, our Shadow Organization was actually part of a stronghold before. It was just that, we made a mistake, and we were banished from the stronghold, the old man began. It turned out that, the Shadow Organization was also a part of the several organizations that were present inside different strongholds. At that time, since they, just like any other organization present in the strongholds, wanted to be the supreme organization, and the leader of the stronghold, they had tried several means possible, to ensure that they managed to reach the top. But, in order to do that, they had gone ahead and committed a crime that was not allowed. That was, they had actually killed a person, the leader of a different organization that was the biggest competitor for them. Of course, during that time, there was a prohibition that people from different organizations were not supposed to kill each other without enough reason. But the shadow organization thought otherwise. After all, they believed that they could actually complete this thing, and completely hide the evidence. After they had done that, they had thought that perhaps, they might actually be the ones that were going to be responsible for the stronghold. But in the end, the organizations that were way bigger than them suddenly made an appearance. The evidence that the shadow organization had worked so hard to hide, was actually unearthed. All the secrets that the shadow organization had been hiding, all the crimes that it had committed, were completely revealed. They came and said that, the only reason as to why the strongholds were developed was for a single reason. And for that reason, all organizations that were present within the strongholds were supposed to support each other, rather than killing each other. So, they came to put in another rule that stated that, if there was not enough reason, people from different organizations were not supposed to fight each other. Otherwise, the two of them would face punishment from the top strongholds. As for the shadow organization, it was banned from ever joining any stronghold. And more than that, in case they were found to be trying to sneak back to the strongholds, all the members of the shadow organization would be killed. And other than this punishment, the leader of the shadow organization, who was the old man's father, since he was the one who had orchestrated the plan to kill his competitor, he was also killed on the spot. Even though it was true that the old man was angry at that time, there was completely nothing that he could do. After all, the people from the bigger strongholds were not to be messed with. Although he had thought that perhaps, he might utilize the chance that the shadow organization was in the dark to rise back to the top, but due to the fact that they were not capable of accessing the resources that were only present in the strongholds, the shadow organization was not able to make a comeback. It had already been several decades ever since then. And, the shadow organization had chosen Izima as their base. They had settled in the southern province simply because this side of the country had not been developed. Since forests encompassed almost the whole province, it had already given them a place that they could seclude themselves. As for recruitments, they will always send someone out to look for those that had better physiques, before nurturing them. This had been going on for several years now, while at the same time, he tried to break the genetic lock, and reach the superhuman level. But, without the resources that could only be found within the strongholds, there was no way that he could do that. And considering that the shadow organization had already lost its backer, a person who had already broken the genetic lock, even those small organizations that were actually supporting them previously, had turned their backs against them. There were even some of them that actually even tried to get some benefits from them. All of this had turned into grievance, that made this old man work harder. But, a lot of effort was not just enough, he needed resources. Jack and the others were also surprised after hearing the history of the shadow organization. None of them had ever thought that the shadow organization was actually previously a member of the strongholds. But considering the power that they possessed, it was considered incredible because they did not have the support of the strongholds. "Oh, so you are the organization that was banished from the strongholds," Samantha exclaimed in understanding. Since she was a member of the stronghold, it was obvious that he had already heard the rumors about a certain organization being banished from the stronghold. That was something that the leaders of each organization actually said, trying to make sure that none of their members committed a crime that was going to cost them a lot. Jack on the other hand furrowed his brows. From what the old man had said, it was obvious that there was actually a group of organizations that was bigger than others. And, these organizations were the ones that possessed great authority, and, since he had already killed Eric, perhaps there might be a group of people that might come to investigate about him. Thinking about this, Jack finally decided that he had to do everything as fast as possible, to ensure that he went to the strongholds, and got the resources to strengthen himself further. Additionally, with the upgrade of the system authority level, he will be able to perhaps strengthen Seline as well. That way, he would have less worries about her. Alright. We now understand about the history of the shadow organization, of which you have not revealed all of it, but that is not something that I care about, Jack said as he looked at the old man that looked melancholic. The old man raised his eyes and looked at Jack, waiting for him to say what it was that he wanted information about. It has already been 2 times that someone said something about me looking like someone. It has already been long enough for me to try and look for information, but I believe that you might enlighten me about this, Jack said indifferently as he looked at the old man. It has already been 2 times that someone said something about me looking like someone. It has already been long enough for me to try and look for information, but I believe that you might enlighten me about this," Jack said indifferently as he looked at the old man. The moment that Jack asked this question, the old man looked at him strangely. It was as if he was asking if Jack was joking with him or he was trying to play a prank on him. Jack frowned the moment that he realized that the old man was not responding, but instead, he was throwing him a gaze that he could not understand. "What is wrong? Are you going to give me the answers or are you going to continue staring at me like that?" Jack asked in a dissatisfied voice. The old man finally came back to his senses and looked at Jack for a while before responding, "You know, even though it is true that you are actually stronger than me, I do believe that this is not a question that I am supposed to answer. Why don't you give me another question so that I can give you answers?" Jack's expression became even more ugly the moment that he had these words. This time, as his aura began leaking out of his body, he looked at the old man and asked once again, "Are you going to give me the answers, or are you going to make me force you say them?" The moment that the old man sensed the pressure that was suddenly on him, he realized that Jack was actually not joking with him. Even though he believed that the question that Jack had asked was actually stupid, he still decided to respond anyway. The shadow organization had already suffered before, and it was already struggling to recover the losses that it had suffered all this while. Now was definitely not the time for it to continue suffering any other losses. I don't really know the reason why you are asking such a question, but the answer is completely obvious. The person that you look alike with is definitely your mother. Even though it is true that your features are more masculine, but there are some details that cannot be hidden." The old man let out a sigh before responding helplessly. Jack looked at the old man for a while, and when he realized that the old man was not giving any other response other than that, his expression continuously turned strange. "Old man, this is obviously not the time to joke around. Perhaps if you want to continue joking, I might as well go outside and kill a few people while you continue joking, and I will only stop at the moment that you are finally going to be serious," Jack said coldly. Jack was not the only one who had reacted in that way to the old man's response. After all, what the old man had simply said was something that both of them knew about. Since they were related by blood, most of the times, children would always look like their parents. "What do you mean by that? Or is it that there is actually someone else that you look like? Perhaps your brother? Or your father?" The old man reacted confusedly when Jack said those words. To him, the question that Jack had asked was something that was all about logic. After all, if someone saw a person's twin, that person would always say that they looked alike. Additionally, there were always moments where people say that a certain person looked like their father or mother. For that reason, the old man didn't find anything wrong in what he had said. But now, Jack was actually thinking that he was joking. Could it be that Jack was just looking for a reason so that he could begin massacring the shadow organization? There was no way that the old man was going to agree to something like that, even if it killed him. Jack's eyes narrowed and he looked at the old man and asked once again, "You know, there's something that I find strange. There is no way that you can say that I look like someone else, if you have never seen that person. So, tell me, have you ever met my mother for you to be able to say that I look like her?" "Of course I have. It is not like I met her once or twice," the old man retorted. It was only after he had said this that he suddenly realized that Jack was actually in the dark about all these. And that was actually the reason as to why he had been asking such a question, while he on the other hand thought that Jack was actually joking about the matter. "You met with my mother?" Jack asked with surprise in his voice. At the same time, he couldn't help but try thinking about any time that he had found that his mother had gone out. But no matter how many times he tried thinking about it, there was not even a single time that he had come to know that his mother had gone away from home. But after thinking about it carefully, he realized that, if what the old man was saying was true, then perhaps his mother would have been moving during the time that he was in school. "What business did my mother have with you?" Jack asked once again. At this moment, he really didn't understand what kind of business his mother, who was a normal person, was actually having with a group of powerful people like this old man and the shadow organization. "And please, don't tell me that you were actually blackmailing her or something," Jack went ahead and warned in advance. The old man looked at Jack with an incredulous gaze. At the same time, he began laughing, without even caring about the fact that Jack was looking at him with a piercing gaze. "Blackmail her? That is something that even if I want to do, there is no way that I can. Instead, it should actually be the other way around. She was the one who was actually blackmailing the shadow organization," the old man said in displeasure. Jack was completely surprised the moment that he heard the old man's words. His mother was the one who was blackmailing them. How was that possible? After all, according to him, since his mother was just a normal person, then, in case she had anything against the shadow organization, then they could have easily dealt with her. I will give you a warning. You better stop slandering my mother's name, otherwise, you will not like what I will do. Being reminded of his mother's memories, even though he was able to get a hold of himself, still, he was completely displeased by the fact that there was actually someone slandering his mother even though she was already gone. What slandering are you talking about? My organization has already suffered several losses, the ones that cannot be recovered easily because of your mother. And now, you actually think that I am lying to you? What benefits do I get by lying to you? The old man questioned back. Jack was just about to burst in anger when suddenly, Seline grabbed his hand. The moment that she did that, Jack finally calmed down. At the same time, his mind began working once again. If what you are saying is true, then why don't you tell me what kind of business my mother had with you? Jack asked after a moment of silence. The old man looked at Jack and shook his head. In the end, he said, that is something that I cannot tell you even if I want to. I signed a contract that I was not going to reveal the business between the two of us. The moment that he said those words, Jack began getting frustrated. After all, this was not the first time that he was actually being prevented from receiving information, simply because of rules and contracts that these people that he was looking for information from were in. His brows began twitching as he silently looked at the old man. Even though there was no way that he could know if what the old man was saying was actually true, there was no way that he was going to risk asking something that was prohibited, and forcing the old man to his death. He himself knew about the contract, as this was something that Samantha had already signed, and he had already received the information about it from the system the moment that it was multiplied. And now, there was still a lot of information that he needed to extract from this old man. Since he was previously a member of the stronghold, there was much information that he possessed. During what time did my mother do business with you? Jack asked. I am sorry, but that is something that is still within the confidential clause of the contract, the old man replied. Did my mother ever mention me during the businesses that the two of you were engaging in? I am sorry, but that is something that is still within the confidential clause of the contract. Does the business that the two of you are dealing in involving anything about the strongholds? I am sorry, but that is something that is still within the confidential clause of the contract. Did the business between the two of you involve anything about me? Or is there information about what my mother was dealing with? I am sorry, but the old man was just about to continue with the same statement, when suddenly, the temperatures in the room suddenly dropped as Jack stood on his feet. He took a few steps closer to the old man and looked him directly in the eyes. To hell with all this and that in the confidential clause of the contract. I want information, anything that can be revealed about my mother, and I don't want any games. To hell with all this and that in the confidential clause of the contract. I want information, anything that can be revealed about my mother, and I don't want any games. Jack said neither of these words in a loud voice, but instead, he said all of them calmly. But still, all those that were present could feel the coldness within the words. And since the old man was the one who was directly facing Jack, he couldn't help but feel his body shuddering, while at the same time, he felt a chilling current suddenly coursing through his spine. He gulped. He had previously been planning to hide a lot of information from Jack, just to get back at him for beating up his son and grandsons. But now, he had completely discarded the thought. After all, it seemed that Jack was getting more impatient the more information he did not receive. He wasn't sure about what Jack was going to do, but, remembering something, and looking at Jack's features, he suddenly decided to become obedient. Okay. I will tell you everything that I am allowed to tell you. The old man took a deep breath and raised his hands as a form of surrendering, as he said these words. Jack went back and took his seat and waited for the old man to tell him what it was that he wanted to say. This was actually the last chance that he was giving the old man. After all, if the old man kept telling him that everything that he asked about was confidential, then that was going to prove that the old man was completely useless to him. And if that was the case, there was no way that he was going to leave any hidden danger behind. For that reason, he was going to eliminate all of them, even if it was going to leave a bad stain in his reputation. He had decided that he was not going to care whether Seline was here or not. After all, he had to show her his true personality, since the two of them had already gotten engaged. In case she did not like him, it was going to be better if she could actually decide to break the engagement at this moment, rather than waiting until the two of them got married first, before looking for a divorce the moment that she came to see this dark side of him. After organizing his thoughts, the old man looked at Jack and began speaking. Actually, the business deal between your mother and the shadow organization could be considered to be benefiting both sides. But of course, your mother was the only one who was receiving the most benefits. Even though it was true that even our organization was benefiting from it, but the amount of benefits that the organization was receiving could not actually be compared to anything that your mother received. It is not like I am trying to call your mother a profiteer or something, but that is just how the situation was. Back then, it was your mother who came to find us during the time that the organization was struggling to gain its foothold, even though it had already gotten away from the strongholds. There were several organizations back at the strongholds that were at odds with us. For that reason, they had actually decided to take this chance to deal with us. Without a person who had broken the genetic lock to become a superhuman, the shadow organization was the weakest as it could be. For that reason, if any of the organizations actually decided to make any move, the shadow organization would have ceased to exist. The deal was simple: she was going to help us gain a foothold. Even though it was true that until now we have not yet managed to get any person who had broken the genetic lock, that was simply because there was yet another agreement that we came to with your mother. Please, don't ask about how your mother managed to help us gain a foothold, and neither should you ask about what agreement we came to with your mother, because that is something that is confidential. Can you stop beating around the bush and go straight to the point? I need to get my wife back home. I don't think that she is comfortable staying here, Jack said with narrowed eyes. When the old man saw the expression on Jack's face, he looked at Seline, and realized that even she herself was actually surprised by what Jack had said. But still, he didn't point anything out, and continued with what he was saying. We came to an agreement with your mother, that we were going to do something for her, and she was going to help us get enough resources that were going to be utilized by me to be able to break the genetic lock and become a superhuman. The old man continued. This was something that should have been completed almost 4 months ago, but until now, we have not actually seen the shadow of your mother. It is as if she simply vanished. We have tried several times contacting her, but no matter how hard we tried, we could not come into contact with her. So, we simply thought that perhaps she had decided to go against the agreement that we had. The shadow organization had already sent several people to go and look for her back at the normal society, but no matter how hard we tried, no matter how much we looked into the area that she previously was in, we didn't find her traces. In the end, we finally decided that we could take you in, so that perhaps if you are here, your mother would actually come over. After all, we had already completed the agreement on our side, and in fact, it seems to have gone way past what we had expected. As the old man reached this point, he stole a glance towards Denali. Even though it was subtle, Jack still managed to see it. At the moment that he realized that the old man's words were actually pointing towards Denali, he frowned once again. He didn't understand what kind of relationship could have existed between Denali, his mother, and the system. After all, during the time that he was getting Denali, that was the time that the system had actually selected her out of all Denalis present in the world. According to the system information, Denali, the one that was currently present, was the only one who actually matched the requirements that Jack had about the personality of a subordinate. As for how the system knew about the requirements, Jack did not need to ask, considering that it could actually read his mind. Now, Jack began getting confused. After all, this was getting more and more mysterious for him to understand. It was not just a matter of the fact that the organization that Denali was trained in actually existed. But now, not only was she actually a candidate that matched everything that Jack was expecting, but it also seemed that she was actually involved with his mother. Jack threw Denali a glance, but he realized that she was completely unaffected by what the old man had said. It was as if what the old man had said was completely unrelated to her. Jack couldn't help but wonder if what the old man was saying was related to Denali, or he was just thinking much about it. Still, he didn't interrupt the old man as he continued. Initially, I had actually planned to let my son come over and invite you. But my youngest grandson got information about this, and he went ahead and kidnapped your wife, the old man continued. As for during the moment that he was calling Seline Jack's wife, he hesitated for a moment before he finished the sentence. The only reason behind this was simply because they had actually been keeping an eye on Jack for the past few months, and for that reason, they actually knew that Jack and Seline had yet to get married. Yes, they were engaged, but they had yet to get married, and for that reason, they were supposed to be called fiancé and fiancée, not husband and wife. But anyway, all of this didn't matter to the old man, as he continued. Actually, during the time that you came over, I had simply thought that your mother had sent you over to deal with us, because she didn't want to complete her end of the agreement. But now that I see that you are almost completely clueless about the matter, I can't help but wonder why your mother kept you in the dark about all the dealings that she had been doing. And I also don't understand why it is that you actually know nothing about the strongholds, not to mention the fact about your mother. After all, it is not easy for someone to be able to break the genetic lock. But now, not only are you young, but you have already broken the genetic lock, and from the looks of it, you didn't break it recently. For you to be able to do something like this, it is obvious that you consumed a lot of resources. And from my investigation and from what you were saying previously, it is obvious that you are completely clueless about the strongholds. And that brings me to wonder where you got all the resources that you utilized to break the gene lock. After reaching that point, the old man finally stopped speaking. Jack, on the other hand, had already sank into deep thoughts. He was actually trying to see if there was any relationship between his mother and the strongholds, but no matter how hard he tried to think about it, there was nothing that he could find. But all of this doesn't make sense. Although I am inclined to not to believe this old man, there is still a fact that my memories and Celine's about each other were actually sealed. Jack began thinking to himself. Technically, or well, scientifically, this is completely impossible considering that even with the current level of technology that humankind possesses, it is not capable of isolating specific memories and lock them away. Can it be possible that my mother was actually a superhuman? Can it be possible that my mother was actually a superhuman? According to Jack's understanding, he knew that if a person really wanted to isolate a certain type of memory, then that person had to actually volunteer to do something that was going to enable them to be capable of doing it. That person would have to do something like perhaps avoiding something that will remind them of that event, try thinking of things that were completely opposite of what they were trying to forget, and so on. But no matter how many times or how hard he tried remembering, there was not even a single day that he had actually been made to try to forget about Seline. And even though he had already recovered his memories about Seline, he didn't even remember how he had lost the memories. To him, he could remember the day that the two of them were parting ways, and ever since then, they had never come into contact with each other until they had grown up. As Jack was still immersed in his thoughts, the old man remained silent as he looked at Jack's expression. He was still confused as to why Jack was not actually in the know of what his mother had been doing all this while. In the end, he could only shake his head. After all, whether Jack knew about it or not, it did not concern him. As for the fact that he had actually revealed something that even Anne did not reveal to Jack, the old man did not have a choice. To him, since Anne was currently unavailable, the only person that he could deal with was Jack. And currently, Jack posed a great danger to the organization. Even though he wasn't sure about what would happen the moment that Anne came to know that he had revealed details about the business deal between the two of them, he didn't have to worry about something that would happen in the future, but had to care about the present. Seline, on the other hand, tightened her grasp on Jack's hand. She could understand that Jack was being given information about his mother that he actually didn't know about. This was something that not just anybody could take easily. After all, Jack had been living with his mother all along, but she had kept something like this hidden from him. And now that everything was being revealed to him, even though it had not yet been proven to be right, it really felt uncomfortable. Seline had already interacted with Anne previously. For that reason, she had already developed a close relationship with her. And the moment that she heard that Anne had passed away, she was obviously grief-stricken. After a long time, finally, Jack looked at the old man and asked, "So, now that my mother is not present, what is the plan of the organization to compensate me? After all, you don't have to tell me that my wife was kidnapped, and there is not going to be any compensation for her." Old man. The old man was completely stunned the moment that Jack said these words. The Shadow organization had already experienced some losses during the time that they had been moving from the stronghold to come over here. Then again, even though it was true that they had actually been helped to stabilize themselves, they still had suffered some losses. But again, here Jack was, trying to ask for compensation from them, after beating up several people in the organization. Just from the injuries that these people had suffered, it was obvious that the resources that were required to bring them back to their top condition was also of great value. Healing a normal person was not expensive. But healing a person that had already begun ranking up, that was completely different. Someone like his son who was wearing a purple mask on his face, since he had already reached the border between normal humans and superhumans, for his injuries to be treated, he would need special medication. "What? You don't want to compensate her?" Jack asked with squinted eyes. The old man felt a chill running down his spine the moment that he felt Jack's gaze on him. Kidnapped Seline a lesson? Even though he was frustrated, the old man could only give in. Even though it was true that he was angry that Jack was actually asking for a lot from them, he didn't have a choice. After all, Jack could easily decide to destroy the organization, even if he himself sacrificed his life. Jack would simply kill him, and go on to kill all the members of the Shadow Organization. So, at this moment, the Shadow Organization was the one at a disadvantage. Additionally, it actually wasn't wrong for Jack to ask for compensation considering that the Shadow Organization was the one that had kidnapped his fiancée. But then again, hadn't Jack already taught the person that had kidnapped Seline a lesson? Even though he was frustrated, the old man could only give in. What kind of compensation would you want? The old man asked in an exasperated voice. Jack did not respond, but instead, he looked at Seline and gave her a nod. He wanted Seline to decide on what she wanted. After all, the compensation was not for him, but for her. Seline was actually puzzled. This was not the first time that Jack had asked for compensation from someone for her. But, all those times, he was the one that was deciding on what the other party was supposed to compensate her with. But this time, he had given her the choice. But although she was having the decisions in her hand, she actually didn't know what to ask from the old man. She didn't even know what could be acquired from him that could be considered useful to her. When Jack noticed that Seline didn't know what to ask for, he patted her back and said, "If you don't know what to ask, let me ask for something for you." When Seline heard his words, she immediately nodded. She was quite relieved that Jack was going to ask for something for her. As for the matter of the two of them being shameless, that was not something that she even considered. She had been denied her freedom for 3 consecutive days, and she had been living with insecurity all this while. Had it not been for the fact that her mindset was not weak, she would have already collapsed. Thankfully, she was able to hold on due to the trust that she had in Jack. "Old man, I only want something that can be used to enhance her abilities," Jack said to the old man. He had already thought about it, and since he could not enhance or do anything for Seline at the moment until he upgraded his system authority to the 2nd level, then he had to look for other methods that could be utilized to help her. It was true that he had previously arranged for someone to protect her, but, all the same, the enemy was too strong and was able to defeat both Denali and Samantha. In that situation, Seline was completely helpless. That was something that Jack did not want a repeat of. The stronger Seline was, the less worried he would be. The old man's expression shifted when he heard what Jack had asked for. "Are you serious? A serum that can be used to enhance the abilities of a person is not that cheap. Even the Shadow Organization itself has only so few left at the moment. With the disappearance of your mother, we don't have any more sources for the res." Just before the old man could complete his statement, his face suddenly paled. And then the next moment, he coughed out a mouthful of blood. It seems that he has attempted to go against the contract. It is just that he has only revealed something small about what the contract states that it should be confidential. Otherwise, he would have already died. At this moment, Samantha spoke. She had already seen several scenes where people tried to go against the contract, or perhaps were forced to do so, and as always, the results were always tragic. Jack was also surprised when the old man coughed blood. But he soon understood why that had happened after Samantha's explanation. He couldn't help but wonder just how powerful the contract was. At the same time, he had already begun thinking about what the old man was revealing. It seemed that his mother was actually the one that was responsible for providing the Shadow Organization with resources. With the Shadow Organization not coming into contact with the strongholds, it was obvious that their sources of resources had been cut off. Since they were even prohibited from ever stepping foot or ever engaging in anything that was related to the strongholds, it was obvious that even the resources from the strongholds were not supposed to be acquired by them. "Just what kind of secret were you hiding, mother? And why would you hide something like this from me? I really don't understand," Jack thought to himself as he remembered his mother's figure. If his mother was actually capable of providing resources for the Shadow Organization, then, why was it difficult for her to deal with the Alfonso family? That was yet something that he could not understand. Suddenly, Jack remembered something that Benjamin had said back then. Flashback *. There are many things that you don't know. If she wanted to leave, there would have been nobody who would have been capable of stopping her from doing that. I hope that you are right about what you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to be in deep trouble. This world has hidden a lot that you don't know and understand. After saying his piece, Benjamin got to his feet before he left the villa. Asterisk asterisk and asterisk asterisk asterisk. At this moment, Jack couldn't help but wonder if Benjamin also knew about the strongholds. After all, what he had said was no different from the thoughts that he was currently having after hearing about the dealings that his mother had been making with the Shadow organization. Jack, do you perhaps know about your mother's whereabouts? We need to complete the agreement sooner, or my Shadow organization is going to suffer. At this moment, the old man spoke again, bringing Jack out of his thoughts.